Hello, Kaylee.
Oh,
Hey, John, how you
hello.
doing?
How are you doing?
How are you? I'm good. I'm good. Kaylee, the last time I talked to you, it was for the Bentonville Film Festival, and you had just finished doing Catch the Fair one. I did a
Yeah,
whole thing with you guys. It's been a minute. So, congratulations on everything that has happened to you since that time. You deserve all of it.
thank you so much. It's been a whirlwind, but it's been a wild, crazy, blessed ride. So thank you.
Listen, I am there for all of it. I wanted to know from you in particular, coming from that boxing background, did that prepare you for the scene where that you, I don't want to say what it is, the scene that you have involving the birth because of the breathing and the intensity that's involved with that scene? Has your background as a boxer, did it help you with that scene at all or not really?
Well, boxing has definitely prepared me for just acting in a whole, especially with the genre of film that I've been kind of just in this pattern of doing.
Mm.
Very visceral experience, the breathing, the repetition, the endurance, and also with this particular character in this particular scene, the internal, not reactive outside type of visceral experience you have to understand at a moment's notice as an audience member. So it definitely did help me with that, definitely with the breathing, definitely with the trying to figure things out at a moment's notice and putting pieces together. It absolutely definitely did help me.
I know that this film is based on Shannon Files' book Black Files. So Jean and Kaylee, I want to ask you this question. There's a quote where someone in the film says, "You do the job because you want to help people, and sometimes you do end up doing the exact opposite." What does that mean for you now, coming out on the other side of this film? And I'll start this time with Jean.
That's the question of the movie, how these people, they start this job, to save life, and sometimes it's more difficult than you think because they're facing stuff that sometimes it's really tough, and it's intense, because every day you have, and I did, ride along to trying to understand the job of a paramedic. I did this for 2 years and I was in the back of the ambulance. And when you have to face every day all these calls, these people calling 911, they call because they have a problem and they are vulnerable and they don't want to go to the hospital because it's very expensive. And so when you have to face this, at one point you kind of also get affected by this, and it's for your mental health, it's really difficult. So the film is really about this guy, he started his job because he wants to save life in a naive way, and then he understands that's not that easy because that he also have to care about his life and his mental health to be able to save lives, So I think that's really the topic of the movie.
Cool, cool. I've been that person in the back of an ambulance that where I didn't want to go to a certain hospital. I got hit by a car one time when I was in college, and they wanted to take me to one hospital, and I was present of mind enough to know that if they took me there, the bills were going to be high. And as a college student, I couldn't afford it, so I was like, "No, you got to take
Yeah.
me to this hospital." And I fought them in that ambulance. And they finally, when I acted out enough, they took me where I wanted to go. And I ended up with like just a little bitty bill. But if they take me to that other place, it would have been a hot mess. I want to talk to you, Jean, also about shooting those ambulance scenes because it's such a tight space for a camera person and a director and the lights and the this and the that. How did you navigate all of that?
Yeah, I wanted to stay, in this kind of small room, and so it was mostly kind of the only the DP, was there with the actors. The first opening scene, you also have one guy, is a cop because it's a shooting scene, and you always have a police guy, in the ambulance. But this guy is also a real paramedic. He's the one who helped us, Lenel, to know exactly. He was a consultant of the movie, and we work with him. So I say, okay, you need to be there like this. You can look what Sean and Ty are doing and make sure, it's realistic because I couldn't see. I could see, from the monitor and stuff, but not being inside the ambulance. So he was my eyes, inside and because I really wanted for this movie to be realistic and just everything they're doing, Ty and Sean to be realistic. And I know for sure it was also something really important to be the seasoned paramedic. So not to look like an actor doing fake stuff, but being a real paramedic. And we shot long shot like this, from the beginning until the end to keep this intensity and to be realistic. So we have to go from outside the ambulance, inside the ambulance, and outside again, and always keeping this movement to keep the energy and the sense of emergency that we can feel, you know, when you are in this kind of course.
Yeah, it was intense. It was giving me like Bringing Out the Dead meets Training Day. Like all of that was kind of like mixed up in it. I was like, oh, Lord, I was not prepared for that ride, but I'm happy that I took the ride. But I was like, oh, not sure what's happening here. Um, Haley, um, you are this mom that is mentally struggling with a lot of things. As an actress in this business, and particularly being an Indigenous actress, where as of late, y'all are getting a lot of love, but that hasn't always been the case. Mentally, how do you keep yourself strong and fit to deal with all the things that are thrown at you at any given moment?
You know, being in, I have the blessing of coming from an indigenous background, a Cape Verdean Wampanoag background, and it's always come back to grounding yourself in your truth and where you come from and who you are. And I have a lot of support, even though may not be physically home. I have a lot of support in my culture, my practices, wise words. You know, you keep a real close corner to you, and life is always happening, life is always lifing. But what's helped me really stay true is to, you know, we have a goal as an indigenous people to tell our stories, to have people see us for who we are, not who they think we are, what they thought we were, and because we're still here. And you know, we have that walking in one shoe, walking in another moccasin. We have to balance between two worlds. That's who we are as people. It's not between the corporate and their everyday life. Yeah, that is, but at the very core of being an indigenous person today, to know what the culture is and be able to practice our culture legally now is exactly that balance. So it's just the grounding and the balance. You have to continue that balance. Whatever your grounding is, whatever really makes you feel at peace and at home. It could be, for me, it's working out. For me, it's, you know, speaking to people back home, or doing my culture or my ceremonies here at home. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just to bring me back to that home, you know. That's what keeps my feet on the ground.
I love that analogy that you use with one foot in one shoe and the other in a moccasin. I'm stealing that. That was a fabulous analogy because it says so much saying so little. Thank you for that. And last but not least, there's there's a couple of scenes where they talk about how a fly can smell death quicker than we can as humans. Is there any, and I promise I have a point going there. Y'all are like, what is she doing? um, is there any kind of smell that either one of you smell that automatically takes you to a mournful place?
No one know exactly the smell of the flesh burnt, you know, when someone get burned, you know, and you smell of the flesh. And they said that's something we can experience, you know, a lot of times in the ambulance, that no one get an idea, you know. And I think that's why it's sometimes tough, because we are not really disturbed by smells and stuff, or bad smells, but not in the human being, you know, smell kind of stuff, you know. So, ugh, and the flies, yeah.
I know, right?
Of flies, and that was the title of the book, you know, Black Flies. So it's metaphorically, you know, these guys, you know, dealing with death, people and death and smell of death, you know, but also with life, hopefully, you know, and a lot of life too.
Yeah, I asked that question because you know how music takes us to a certain place, so do smells. Go ahead, Kaylee. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, and this sounds probably not something that people would say, but the smell of flowers is very mourning to me. Like the overwhelming smell of flowers just reminds me of death, because at a funeral or a wake I just remember, especially as a kid, going to like different funerals for family members, of smelling of flowers. Like, it's a beautiful thing. It is life and it is death in the same. So I love looking at flowers. I love seeing flowers, but the smell of flowers, it just brings me to a kind of a mourning place, because I associate the smell of flowers with death.
Haley, you a deep doll. Between the moccasin analogy and the flower analogy, like I can't with you. You are just so deep. I cannot handle you right now.
It's a Virgo brain. It's the Virgo brain, man.
That's why we love Kelly, you know, a deep doll and a fighter.
Yes.
She is a fighter. I love her.
Thank you. Nice talking to you again.
Nice talking to you too. Bye.
Bye.